Deva is an Avestan language term for a particular sort of supernatural entity with disagreeable characteristics. In the Gathas, the oldest texts of the Zoroastrian canon, the Devas are wrong gods, or false gods, or gods that are rejected. This meaning is subject to interpretation, perhaps also evident in the Old Persian Daeva inscription of the 5th century BCE. In the Younger Avesta, the Devas are noxious creatures that promote chaos and disorder. In later tradition and folklore, the Dews are personifications of every imaginable evil. Deva, the Iranian language term, should not be confused with the Devas of Indian religions. While the word for the Vedic spirits and the word for the Zoroastrian entities are etymologically related, their function and thematic development is altogether different. The once widespread notion that the radically different functions of Iranian Deva and Indic Deva represented a prehistoric inversion of roles is no longer followed in 21st century academic discourse. Equivalents for Avestan Deva in Iranian languages include Pashtu, Baluchi, Kurdistani, Persian Div, Dev, all of which apply to demons, monsters, and other villainous creatures. The Iranian word was borrowed into Old Armenian as Dew, Georgian as Devi, and Urdu as Dio, with the same negative associations in those languages. In English, the word appears as Deva, Div, Dev, and in the 18th century fantasy novels of William Thomas Beckford as Dive. Scholastic issues. Problems of interpretation. Old Avestan Daeva or Deva derives from Old Iranian *Diva, which in turn derives from Indo-Iranian *Diva, God, reflecting Proto-Indo-European *Deuo with the same meaning. For derivatives in a European context, see Tia. The Vedic Sanskrit cognate of Avestan Daeva is Deva, continuing in later Indo-Aryan languages as Dev. Because all cognates of Iranian *Diva have a positive connotation, but no known Iranian dialect attests clearly and certainly the survival of a positive sense for Old Iranian *Diva. In the 19th and 20th century, a great deal of academic discussion revolved around questions of how Iranian Deva might have gained its derogatory meaning. This fundamental fact of Iranian linguistics is impossible to reconcile with the testimony of the Gathas, where the Devas, though rejected, were still evidently gods that continued to have a following. The same is true of the Daeva inscription, where the Daeva are the gods of rebels, but still evidently gods that continued to have a following. The issue is related to the question of how Zoroaster's own contribution to Iranian religion might be defined. In the older early, mid-20th century view, in which Zoroaster was perceived to be a revolutionary reformer, it was assumed that the Devas must have been the national gods of pre-Zoroastrian Iran, which Zoroaster had then rejected. In this scenario, the rejection of the Devas is linked to Zoroaster's reform, and Gershwich and others following Lamil consider the progression from national gods to demons to be attributable to the genius of Zoroaster. Subsequent scholarship has a more differentiated view of Zoroaster, and does not follow the unprovable assumption that prehistoric Iranian religion ever had national gods. Nor does it involve hypothetical conjecture of whose gods the Devas might not have been. While the progressive hypothesis gives Zoroaster credit for giving Iranian religion a moral and ethical dimension, it does not give Zoroaster credit for the development of the Devas into demons. It assumes that the development was gradual, and that a general distrust of the Devas already existed by the time the Gathas were composed. In comparison with Vedic usage, although with some points of comparison such as shared etymology, Indic Deva is thematically different from Avestan Deva. In the Rig Veda, the Devas are the younger gods, in conflict with the Asuras, the demons. There is no such division evident in the Zoroastrian texts, and, while in the post-Rig Vedic Indic texts the conflict between the two groups of Devas and Asuras is a primary theme, this is not a theme in either the Rig Veda nor in the Iranian texts, and therefore cannot have been a feature of a common heritage. The use of Asura in the Rig Veda is unsystematic and inconsistent, and it can hardly be said to confirm the existence of a category of gods opposed to the Devas. Indeed, Rigvedic Deva is variously applied to most gods, including many of the Asuras. Likewise, at the oldest layer, Zoroastrianism's Devas are originally also gods, and it is only in the younger texts that the word evolved to refer to evil creatures, and the Zoroastrian Ahuras are also only vaguely defined, and only 3 in number. Moreover, the demonization of the Asuras in India and the demonization of the Devas in Iran both took place so late that the associated terms cannot be considered a feature of Indo-Iranian religious dialectology, the view popularized by Nyberg, Duchesne, Gilliman and Weidengren of a prehistorical opposition of asterisk Asura. Deva involves interminable and entirely conjectural discussions on the status of various Indo-Iranian entities that in one culture are Asuras, Ahuras, and in the other are Devas, Devas. In scripture, in Zoroaster's revelation in the Gathas, the oldest texts of Zoroastrianism and credited to Zoroaster himself, the Devas are not yet the demons that they would become in later Zoroastrianism, though their rejection is notable in the Gathas themselves. The Gathas speak of the Devas as a group, and do not mention individual Devas by name. In these ancient texts, the term Devas occurs 19 times, wherein Devas are a distinct category of quite genuine gods, who had, however, been rejected. In Yashna 32.3 and 46.1, the Devas are still worshipped by the Iranian peoples. Yashna 32.8 notes that some of the followers of Zoroaster had previously been followers of the Devas, though the Devas are clearly identified with evil. In the Gathas, Devas are censured as being incapable of discerning truth from falsehood. They are consequently in error, but are never identified as dreguant, people of the lie. The conclusion drawn from such ambiguity is that at the time the Gathas were composed, the process of rejection, negation, or demonization of these gods was only just beginning, but as the evidence is full of gaps and ambiguities, this impression may be erroneous. In Yashna 32.4, the Devas are revered by the USIJ, described as a class of false priests, devoid of goodness of mind and heart, and hostile to cattle and husbandry. Yashna 30.6 suggests the Deva-worshipping priests debated frequently with Zoroaster, but failed to persuade him. In the Younger Avestar, the Devas are unambiguously hostile entities. In contrast, the word Deva Yashna denotes adherents of other religions and thus still preserves some semblance of the original meaning in that the Deva prefix still denotes other gods. In Yasht 5.94, however, the Deva Yashna are those who sacrifice to Anahita during the hours of darkness, i.e., the hours when the Devas lurk about, and Deva Yashna appears then to be an epithet applied to those who deviate from accepted practice or harvested religious disapproval. The Vendidid, a contraction of Idevodata, given against the Devas, is a collection of late Avestan texts that deals almost exclusively with the Devas, or rather, their various manifestations and with ways to confound them. Vi. Deva, rejecting the Devas, qualifies the faithful Zoroastrian with the same force as Mazda Yashna. In Vendida 10.9 and 19.43, 3 divinities of the Vedic pantheon follow Angramenu in a list of demons, completely adapted to Iranian phonology. These are Indra, Sava, and Nanghai. The process by which these 3 came to appear in the Avestar is uncertain. Together with 3 other Devas, Tauru, Zariri and Natu, that do not have Vedic equivalents, the 6 oppose the 6 Amesha Spentis. Vendida 19.1 and 19.44 have Angramenu dwelling in the region of the Devas, which the Vendidid sets in the northern, or the nether world, a world of darkness. In Vendidid 19.1 and 19.43-44, Angramenu is the Diephanam Devo, Deva of Devas, or chief of the Devas. The superlative Devo timer is however assigned to the demon Paitisha. In an enumeration of the Devas in Vendidid 1.43, Angra Mainyu appears first and Paitisha appears last. Nowhere is Angra Mainyu said to be the creator of the Devas or their father. The Vendidid is usually recited after nightfall since the last part of the day is considered to be the time of the demons. Because the Vendidid is the means to disable them, this text is said to be effective only when recited between sunset and sunrise. In inscriptions, Old Persian Daeva occurs twice in Xerxes' Daeva inscription. This trilingual text also includes one reference to a Daeva house of the Daevis, generally interpreted to be a reference to a shrine or sanctuary. In his inscription, Xerxes records that, by the favor of Ahura Mazda I destroyed that establishment of the Daevis and I proclaimed, the Daevis thou shalt not worship. This statement has been interpreted either one of two ways. Either the statement is an ideological one and Daevis were gods that were to be rejected, or the statement was politically motivated and Daevis were gods that were followed by enemies of the state.